This is your host, Mohammed Bader, aka the Arabian Traveler. This episode is in English. I'm joined this morning on February 15th, 2025, with Miles Spencer. I want to thank all of my listeners across the globe. We are being broadcast via Spotify and Apple Podcast in over 100 countries. Within the last month, the podcast ranked number one for a few days in a row in Jordan and Tunisia. It ranked number 3 in Iraq and number 6 in Egypt. Miles Spencer is an American digital media entrepreneur, angel investor, and explorer. He is best known for his role as co-host and co-creator of MoneyHunt, a reality-based business advice show distributed on US public broadcasting stations beginning in 1997. He cooks, writes, and paints watercolors based on his travels. He mentors 2 kids and several entrepreneurs. I'm intrigued by his genius and ambition as a multi-talented individual who could hold divergent fields: money, culture, art, and food. As our focus is on art and poetry, we won't delve into politics, but we might end up wandering there. As his novel, A Line in the Sand, co-authored by Mells Jones, captures the essence of the Middle East with a richly detailed historical fiction of 2 lifelong friends, Magnus and Finn. I want to start first. Miles, I want to just thank you for joining me. I feel like we're like these 2 spirits that connected with each other. It's just amazing. I don't know if you knew when we talked with each other that I was born in Jerusalem, so I also have a Jordanian citizenship. I have a sister who lives in Iraq and Amman, and I know you traveled. I have family who lives in Saudi Arabia. So I'm just also intrigued by how you're able to hold this kind of business part of your life in art. And so as I read your book, it just reminded me of Van Gogh, actually, because Van Gogh was one of the artists who was able to describe his paintings to his brother Theo, like when he wrote these letters to his brother Theo. And I just was listening to some of the vivid description that you had about Aqaba and Wadi Rum and all these places I've been to. It was like really very fascinating. So I just I'd like to start by asking you to introduce yourself, talk about, first of all, who you are. I tried to give a brief bio about you, but I won't do it justice as much as you would do. So welcome to the Arabian Traveler Poetry.
Mohammed, thank you so much for having me, and salam alaikum to your
Alaikum
listeners.
salam.
I consider myself just a curious boy from Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. I grew up in the Midwest, so perhaps I had a good work ethic and love sports, of course, but it was always the curiosity for who, what, where, why, when that has driven me the rest of my life. And whether that's in art, I'm certainly no Van Gogh. I might write letters like Van Gogh, but I certainly don't paint like him. To raising kids, to starting businesses in technology, digital media, and entertainment field. Um, I just have this insatiable curiosity for how things work and why people do things. And that's ultimately what led me and Wells to the Middle East, trying to answer who, what, why, where, when after 9/11. And it eventually led to this book, which is our opportunity to share what we learned and share what understanding we gained for a Western audience. And there have been precious few people that have been able to do that, and very few people, aside from perhaps military and people that work for Aramco, who have had the chance to live and work in the Middle East. And so this was an opportunity to bridge those gaps and provide some understanding. And I'm so glad that you picked up on it, and that it's been popular on Amazon and popular in some of the same countries that your podcast is popular, Jordan, Syria, Saudi Arabia and Egypt. So thank you for having me on the show, Mo.
Yeah,
It's a great
yeah,
honor.
wonderful. And you said you have two kids, and I was impressed. It looks like one of your kids plays rugby, and you're a coach. So, um, uh, how does that? How are you able to uh, do all this stuff and be available to your kids? It's an important thing.
Well, yes, one that's played rugby, my 13-year-old. Actually just back from morning practice and training with him. I mentioned I was an athlete in high school and university, and so to be able to see somebody else pursuing their passion on the field to play is great. Rugby is a crazy game. It's not like American football. There's 100 different rules, as you know, and a lot going on. Currently, there's Six Nations to watch, so you can learn a little bit. But it's a great thrill to spend time with him. My daughter is actress and a volleyball player, so I get to spend a significant amount of time with her. Again, athletically as well. I'm not so much of an actor. Uh,
Yeah.
and how do I have the time for that? Well, I think the secret there, Mo, is I've had the luxury of doing what I love for a living.
Hmm.
And because of that, people often ask me, "Are you full time with X? Are you full time with Y?" And like, this morning I was on the rugby field with my son. But I came up with a great solution to a problem that had been nagging me for quite some time. But I had that
Hmm.
epiphany while there was a rugby ball in my hand. So was I working? Or was I parenting? Or was I playing rugby? The answer is who cares? And that has allowed me to spend more time on my kids, more time with my artwork, more time with my writing, and more time with my businesses because they all seem to feed each other.
Well, thank you very much. I appreciate that. I wanted to maybe take us on a journey. I know that you've done treks, you've done kayaking, lots of things. I'm interested though in the book A Line in the Sand, and in Arabic, I notice you call it the خط في الرمل. And I hope that maybe one day we can translate it into Arabic for you because it's really a wonderful book. Um, you've taken the path of T. Lawrence. Can you tell me a little bit about like how you how did you think of this, and maybe just talk a little bit about the trip and the trek you took, and it seems to me like 18 years later you then decided to write the novel. So I'd like to hear a little bit more on that and kind of what led you to the initial trip. And you started
Sure.
in Spain, it sounds like, or and then moved around. So I'd like maybe give the audience a little bit of a teaser in terms of like getting so that they can get the novel and appreciate it.
Well, thank you. So the genesis of the trip was actually after 9/11. I was reading everything I could. I was studying everything I could, just trying to answer who, what, why, where, when. And I wasn't really getting answers that seemed to make sense to me. My good friend and co-adventurer Wells Jones was coming through town, and we're having uh, there's some time on the back porch, and I said, "What do you read me?" This is Seven Pillars of Wisdom by T.E. Lawrence. I said, "I just finished that. So what do you think?" And we both concluded that he was the one man in the last 100 years who had spent a significant time with, let's just say, the Bedouin tribes of that area and truly understood them, their region, their culture, their language, their cuisine, their religion, and was able to translate that back to Westerners in a way that nobody else has since, I believe. And so I looked at Wells, and Wells looked at me and said, "Well, what do we do now? We've read the books. Let's go." And so we decided at that moment to retrace the steps of T.E. Lawrence and Seven Pillars of Wisdom, roughly from Jeddah, Saudi Arabia,
Uh-huh.
up the Red Sea coast, Yenbo, Al-Weja, Aqaba, over across to Wadi Rum, continuing in Jordan through Karak, the Moabist, I just call it Karak, up to the Syrian border, Daraa, which is a famous scene in Seven Pillars, also in Lawrence of Arabia, the movie, on to Damascus, Syria, and then eventually to a Crusader castle in Homs, Syria called Krak Chevalier. Crusader castles were very important to Lawrence in his original thesis to Oxford. It was the difference between Crusader castles of the Levant and Crusader castles in France, but that also gave him the excuse to kind of cruise around there and eventually do some
Uh-huh. Yeah.
cartography, map drawing, spying for the British. Um, but that's what we followed. And then we circled back, crossed the King Hussein Bridge from Jordan into Israel, continued on to Jerusalem, which Lawrence spent some time in when
Uh-huh.
Jerusalem fell and Allenby walked into town, did not come in on a horse. So he was there as well. So we felt like we did our best to retrace those steps. When we call it a trek, it was foot and camel and horse and some Toyota FJ in support. So it was a combination of all those things. We didn't walk all 1,000 kilometers. And we met some very interesting people along the way.
Yeah, I wanted
And
to ask you a little bit because there's like some scenes where you've described people really vividly, and I was hoping to have a little bit of a explanation because your book kind of goes back and forth between 1917 and modern day time. It also looked like it had some history, some real history, but maybe some fiction. And so, can you talk about that? It sounds to me like you've done some research in history and kind of woven the history, some historical facts with that. And um, perhaps you can give like a glimpse. It looks like it was a lot of like um, a little bit of flashbacks and foreshadows and a lot of metaphors like that. And uh,
well,
so.
I'll take that as a compliment. I am not a historian.
Mm,
I don't have a history degree, nor does Wells. I am a lover of history. I use storytelling to teach myself and others about history that I think is important to our
mhm,
understanding of the world today.
yeah.
And so this was the first journey that we chose to talk about that. It is a historical fiction. Having said that, Wells and I did an immense amount of preparation before the trip and research before the trip. And then we had the benefit of our personal experience in these places with these people, eating this food, experiences these border crossings.
Mhm.
Um, and so it's probably different than a traditional academic historian might have access to in a library.
Yeah.
And it's perhaps different than someone with boots on the ground, perhaps military, perhaps petroleum
Yeah.
employee that would not have the historical context. So we're just this somewhat unique blend of the two.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
as I
Yeah.
say, I'm just here to use storytelling as a way to teach history and history that I think is very important to us
Yeah.
all.
And I don't know if you have the book in front of you, but I was hoping if you're willing to read, there was a chapter there, and I think it was the first part of the chapter, as you described Aqaba. And I was wondering if you can read the first or two paragraphs there. They describe the town and the Red Sea in such a vivid way that much like a painter, and that's where so I was wondering if you're willing to read
I'd be happy
that. And
to.
yeah,
I will mention that the best reader of all time for this book is Eduardo Ballerini, who did the Audible. So
yeah, yeah. I
even
listened to him.
though, yeah, even though the words are the same, I just find that when they're from
Yeah,
Eduardo, they
yeah.
just
He
sound
did
different.
such a good job, but I imagine that Audible will flag me for copyright, so I cannot record that.
That's fine. I will do this. I will do this from I will do this from the horse's mouth, as they
Yes,
say, right? Let's see. I think this is going to be um, Aqaba,
Acapella. Yeah.
right? The colors of the landscape in the Gulf of Aqaba are like no other seen by the human eye. It's a canvas of earth tones, first dominated by reds, especially at sunrise and sunset. when the amount of particulate in the air distorts the rays of sun and lights the sky aflame. With the sky red, the earth itself reflects these tones in the dunes, the rock formations, and even for a moment, the sea. While some photographers look for the golden hour around the globe, any lens trained to a subject here in this time has an effect that is beyond dramatic in contour and shadow. In watercolor, perhaps ideally suited to these natural, nuanced colors, the reader who paints watercolor might choose a blend of Desert Rose Pantone 188 and Dune Dusk Pantone 7627. For a reader who does not paint, one might just close their eyes and imagine.
Yeah, it's very beautiful. It was very beautiful, and it's very poetic. The other part I just wanted you to talk about is that there was a scene there that it sounds like you're in Karak, and you're also seeing smoke from Karak across town in Hebron. My dad happened to have was born in Hebron, my mom and dad actually. And ironically, my sister lives in Karak, so that kind of drew my attention there. And I wonder, like, if you can this either describe or if you want to read kind of what happened there, and um, that was a part where I felt that you're also trying to say a little bit in an artistic way about what's going on in the region.
Sure, I'll give it a try, at least my best. This is a view of Hebron from Karak.
Yes,
From the promontory of Karak, they could barely see to the hills of Hebron, Bethlehem, and Jerusalem, framing the Dead Sea in the foreground. It looked almost peaceful, a miniature diorama of biblical times, hardly changed in thousands of years. Hebron's the largest city in the West Bank, perched atop the Judean hills in the very center of the territory's southern portion. The city is home to 165,000 Palestinians and 500 Israeli settlers who have taken up residence in and around the Old Quarter since 1968. Hebron is also home to the tomb of the patriarchs, where tradition says Abraham and Isaac and Jacob and their respective wives are buried. Like the city itself, it is divided down the middle.
thank you. Yeah. Um, like the book is just full of adventures. Honestly, I can see it as a movie one of these days. That
Yeah.
would be great. And there's a lot of um, like in terms of traveling, I was intrigued because I also was looking at the shows that you put on the money show. I think you call it, what was it called?
It's called MoneyHunt. It's
Money.
25 years ago, but it's
Yeah,
kind
yeah.
of the predecessor to Shark Tank. Yes.
Yeah, it's very amazing because I think in the book you talk about like you had this as you were crossing the borders and when you were stopped by the border, Israeli border patrol or crossing the bridge, you had like some sort of device that they were intrigued by. They were like, "What is this?" So it looked like even way back when you had this technology, you had like a was it like a Wi-Fi device or?
We were, Mohammed, we were definitely cutting edge on technology.
Uh-huh.
But you did mention Money Hunt, the book.
Yeah.
That was how we originally got to Saudi Arabia.
Hmm.
YPO, the Young Presidents Organization, invited me to speak about my book at YPO Riyadh.
Ah,
And
all right.
so I brought Wells along as my bodyguard.
Yeah.
And I guess the presentation was acceptable because afterward they said, "What else can we do for you?" You're inside the Saudi tent at that point. I said, "Well, we'd like to hike 1,100 miles from Jeddah, Saudi Arabia to Damascus, Syria, retracing the steps of T.E. Lawrence and Seven Pillars of Wisdom." To which they said, "Sure.
Sure.
What would you like?" And
Yeah.
that was the beginning of a wonderful relationship there. But at border crossings, we did Jordan, Saudi, we did Saudi, Jordan, we did Jordan, Syria, we did Syria, Jordan, we did Jordan, Israel. Um, without fail, they were interested in our kit. Now, remember, it's two men with only a backpack apiece, clean shaven, more or less, by Western standards. And uh, we only explained to them that we were there to see with our own eyes and understand. And they just couldn't believe it. And so as they went through our kit, I'll break it down for you. We each had a PLB, that's a personal locator beacon that actually sends a signal to uh, OSAA, the Oceanographic Society, which was tied to our KNR, kidnap and ransom policy. So if we pulled that beacon and didn't have a response, and I think we had 5 minutes, then they would come get us.
Oh, all right.
Whatever,
Yep.
whatever that means.
Hmm.
But we had some money behind it in order to
Yeah,
come get
yeah.
us.
So like you had an
Um,
evacuation policy or something? Oh,
correct.
all
Yeah,
righty.
the
Yep,
KNR
yep.
included extraction.
All right.
Um, the second device was a tough book computer, which actually
Mhm.
wraps up a lot of law enforcement's military
Yep.
had this, but it's virtually indestructible. We had a BGAN transmitter, which looks like a laptop, but there's no
Yeah.
keyboard,
Oh, wow.
and it actually accesses the satellites directly.
Hmm.
And so what we were doing was essentially, even back in those days, we were blogging each day, recording our observations, recording a couple of videos and a couple of photos,
Yeah, yeah.
putting it up to the cloud, and then deleting all of our devices. So
Okay.
every day when we woke up, there was nothing to talk about.
Oh, okay. Excellent. That's why. So there was a scene where there's a woman, I think it was an Israeli uh,
Yes,
border
yes.
that was looking at that and just kind of couldn't find any. Okay, that explains. Um, in the Money Hunt, I was intrigued because you've interviewed the founder of Yahoo and other places, and that was very intriguing because some of the episodes I saw, there was a reference to something that resembled like an iPhone and searching the internet, and so that was really amazing. So what happened with the Money Hunt? Like, you put on that show for like almost 5 or 6 years, or and
That's correct. It was 5 years, about 150 episodes. During that time, remember it's .com, and remember this is public television, so there are no commercials, but you
uh,
are able to get sponsors. We had sponsors like Yahoo and MasterCard and PricewaterhouseCoopers and the rest. And so they paid for our production, and we licensed it both to PBS, but we licensed it in 13 countries overseas.
hmm.
So I would see myself in Korean and in Spanish and in
Oh,
Italian,
that's
and
great.
that was
Yeah.
pretty funny. But eventually, when
Hmm.
it was created because what we were um, looking for was the deal flow that our venture capital firm could invest in. And indeed, the venture capital firm did extremely well. And we exited right around 2000. And then we also exited the production company assets in 2001, which was RAI, the state network in Italy,
Yes.
basically bought the slots for one of their program called FBC. It was a business report based in Rome.
Yep.
And so we kind of got a double dip out of it. I bought back the catalog later, and so I actually own it. And then started. It was never distributed anywhere else for 10 or 15 years. And I just realized, like, hey, let's have some fun. And wow, you have to understand that it was PBS, so there are no commercials in the middle, which means the commercials are at the end, which means that the lead up to actually get to the show is like a minute and a half before anybody says anything.
Oh, wow.
And
Yeah,
for
yeah.
today's limited attention span, that doesn't kind of work. So the pro tip I recommend, speed forward to about the second minute of each one of the YouTubes and be a little bit of fun. And
Yeah.
you'll see some old school technology companies and consumer products companies that came on the show and presented. It was a blast. And
Yeah,
then it
no,
was
that's
over.
great. That's no, no, that was very that was I'm drawn to Shark Tank, and it was like really interesting to see like you've also kind of started something pre-Shark Tank. That was amazing. I want to go back to the novel a little bit more because there was also a couple other areas that piqued my interest. One, how you described the Arabic food, and I was impressed. I think the reader on Audible did actually a really good job with the pronunciation of even mentioning kinafe, and it looked like you had maklube, which is a
Mhm.
Palestinian dish, and other ones, and it's just so I want maybe talk to me a little bit about the food and the culture, and uh, how did you find the Arabic culture, right? I think I'm drawn to the fact as an Arab American, I lived in this country for 35 years, and we continually fight a negative image about us as a culture, and it's nice to see somebody who goes there and eat our food and connect with our people. And I just wanted to see, like, as an American who went out and visited, what did you think of the people? And if you want to read anything, it's up to you. If
Sure,
you
I'd be
can find it.
happy to.
Yeah.
Well, I'd preface it by saying, Mohammed, that Wells and I love food. And we also are pretty active people, so we end up pretty hungry by lunchtime. And lunch is generally our biggest meal, as it is in the Middle East. So I'll read about one of my favorite dishes. It's actually mezze. And this is in Iraq, as you mentioned. Uh, the table was soon adorned with layers of small plates of vibrant mezze and a bowl of creamy, coffee-hued baba ganoush. A sweet and smoky flavor, a dance of tradition. At last, they dug in. Whoa, I've never had baba ganoush like this. It's wonderful. What's in the recipe? Are these pomegranate seeds? Marveled Finn, who dug in first. They are indeed, son. And a bit of parsley. I roast the eggplants on an open fire with onions and garlic until they all char on the skins. And I make one long cut and scoop out the pulp, only breaking them up with my hands. And I mince the onions and garlic fine and add lemon and salt and pomegranate at the end. That's it.
Wow, that's
It
great.
is it
Yeah.
is my favorite. I make it that way now myself. Um, and food was wonderful. It's healthy. It's a Mediterranean diet. The protein doesn't so much come from meat as it does from other sources. There's a realistic amount of food consumed rather than perhaps in America, where it's sometimes unrealistic. And so in almost each chapter, you see the grandmothers playing a very important role in this, right?
Uh-huh. Yeah.
Um, and the grandmothers also have their recipes, which come from their forebears. And even as we travel in time, we're still eating the same food from the same people and really, really enjoying it. So I wish there were a few more Middle Eastern restaurants and caterers here in the Northeast. There
Hmm.
are a few.
Yeah.
We know who
Yeah.
they are. We'll typically have a feast that'll go on for days. And yeah, once or twice a year, we just have, a line in the sand night in New York and have a few dozen people over and just eat and eat and eat mostly these recipes. And I truly enjoy it. I can almost taste it now.
Yeah, that's great. What do you say is your biggest learning, either about yourself or about those cultures you visited?
I can answer both with one story as a
Yes.
storyteller. So I think what I learned was how little I knew. And the example would be chapter 5, which is a place in the northwest corner of Saudi Arabia called Magar al-Sheb.
Hmm.
And we're a bit tired by this point in the journey. even though we're probably one third through it. And our guide is very animated and very excited and very difficult to understand. But he's talking about how these prophets were at one time or another based here. And one was Musa, and one was Hagar, and one was Abraham, and one was Ezra. And I finally said, stop. The prophets that you're referring to, where are you getting those stories? He said, well, the Quran. And so
Hmm.
Ezra, Hagar, Moses, and Abraham, and the rest of them are from the Bible.
Uh-huh.
And I said, okay, time out. Let's call a friend in Bethlehem. He's a Talmudic scholar. I said, hey, Jeremy. Jeremy says, yeah. Uh, I'm going to read you 12 prophets that I just heard stories about. Tell me how many are in the Torah. We went 12 for 12. And what I realized in that spot, in that moment, was, as I said, how little I knew, how I had been taught as a Christian in the Midwest that we had our stories and the rest were all bunk. And the reality was, all three religions are using all three prophets, telling all three of pretty much the same
Hmm.
stories.
Yep.
And yet somehow there's some sliver of difference
Yep.
that gets exacerbated and magnified, and that drives the religious conflict between the three.
Yeah. Thank you. No, that's really amazing because, Abraham, I used to teach a lot of classes and I used to say like, um, had Abraham not gone to all these countries, maybe we won't have all these conflicts. Because, like, wherever Abraham went, whether it was in Ur or whether in everywhere, it left like a historical important site,
Right.
and people become like really very attached to uh, whether it's like a physical site or what have you, and it becomes really very important. Well, I think, we managed to really talk a lot about uh, this wonderful book, and we've got like I think I've got like a couple more minutes to wrap this up and just highlight this wonderful literary piece. There was a part there that also stuck in my mind where you describe in your book about some young Arab boys playing, they're half naked, they're either playing soccer or doing something. And I think that ended up with how you describe how resilient kids are and how hopeful they are. And that reminds me of, like, without getting too much into politics, the tough situation that kids endure in Gaza and other parts of Palestine. And so I was hoping maybe if you can read, we can end on that hopeful note there where, and I don't know if you have that chapter available for you or not, or if you can just
I do.
describe what you see.
I
Yeah.
do.
Yeah.
I
Thank you.
do. Um, as you mentioned, this is a chapter aside from the discussion we just had in Karak. They continue on. They're in Jordan, and this would be chapter 10 in the present day. As Magnus, Finn, Jahani, and Abdu reached the scene, they were met with a surreal picture that was a stark contrast to the paradise that they had imagined and Jahani had described to them before their visit. The rocks, once pristine, were now marred with inescapable trash. Discarded remnants of picnics and gatherings and feces covered some of the rocks, and the smell was nauseating, a jarring reminder of the lack of proper sanitation facilities. There was a waterfall itself, as described, but simply a few trickles of soapy spring water in a seeping coliform green from above that barely resembled the image painted by their guide. It was a sad testament to everyday quality of life that Palestinians endured, a stark reminder of the challenges they faced. And yet, half-naked boys clamored for a ball, pushing and shoving each other in shouts and laughter that echoed off the rock walls, filling the air with their playful spirit, unaffected by their surroundings. Abdu's voice, tinged with sadness, spoke up. This, my friend, is the resilience of the Palestinian spirit. Even in the face of hardship, they find joy in the simple pleasures of life, in each other's company. Shahani nodded in agreement, his gaze toward the boys by the waterfall. It's a reminder that happiness can be found in the most unexpected places, that the human spirit can endure even the harshest of circumstances.
Wow. Thank you, Miles. I really, this is a good note to end on. I thank you for taking the time of your busy schedule on a Saturday. I like to invite all my audience to look at Miles' book, and if you can just quickly let us know where people can find it, how can they get a hold of you, if they want to get a hold of you, and then we'll sign off after this.
Sounds great. We're all in Amazon, so A Line in the Sand is available as a paperback, as a Kindle, and also as Audible, all at Amazon.com. For more of my crazy rantings as an individual, entrepreneur, father, artist, etc., there's milesspencer.com, 2 S's in the middle, and I'm pretty active on LinkedIn. That's probably my most frequent social channel. So any one of those, feel free to reach out. Be happy to hear from any of your audience.
Thank you, Miles, and thank you to our audience. Thank you for listening to the Arabian Traveler Poetry, المسافر العربي بالشعر باللغة العربية. With us was Miles Spencer, author, father, and entrepreneur. Until we meet again, إلى اللقاء.